Hello everybody, welcome back. We are looking again at Players' Cup 3, the video game side of things. This is the EU Losers Bracket round 9 of the official VGC live stream. And we're looking at a matchup between Maynard and Guilio Tarlao. Now this matchup is a little bit different than the two that we have seen previously so far in Players' Cup 3. Our first ones were a Groudon versus Zacian in terms of the restricted Pokemon slot. This time, we actually get a little bit of a rivalry battle in between the Pokemon, not necessarily the trainers themselves, Groudon and Kyogre. Now, this is actually really interesting because we finally get two different important weather setters. We also have some interesting mirroring in that both teams have Porygon 2, looking to either set up Trick Room or limit the opponent's use of Trick Room. Of course, we have Regieleki and Thundurus, we have Charizard, Ferrothorn, all sorts of exciting stuff, and Incineroar on both teams as usual. So let's go ahead and get right into game number 1. I am super excited for this game, this is going to be very positioning based. As we see, we have Incineroar and Dragapult come out here for Guilio, and we see Thundurus and Amoonguss here. So these starts are kind of indicative of what both these players want to do. Guilio wants to be switching, wants to have a lot of fast action, get things going right away with the Incineroar and the Thundurus. Incineroar's Intimidate does come out. I actually didn't see if it does not look like this Thundurus is most likely Defiant, but hold on, I am going to rewind this a little bit just because I want to check this here. Intimidate comes out. Let me just double check. Okay, Thundurus is Defiant does work. Okay, my apologies. So Thundurus Defiant does trigger, and so both players definitely. All right, so in these previous games, a lot of times we've seen Groudon lead, we've seen Groudon switch in right away. Both players here are going to have to be very, very careful of when they switch in their restricted Pokemon, because whichever comes in last, or whatever is slower, will set up their weather. Of course, we see Groudon comes in here from Matt, so the sun will come up, and Amoonguss was the slowest Pokemon on the battlefield. So good job from Matt. Amoonguss would switch out last, which means Groudon would come in last. Sun is up, and we see Matt is going to go ahead and Dynamax. Now, the problem here for Matt is Guilio has not swapped in the Kyogre yet. So Thundurus comes out. Thundurus is a fairly strong Kyogre answer, especially into an Incineroar's Intimidate, because it can hit it with, a Max Lightning that is boosted 2 times from the Defiant, or well, 1 time from the Defiant after the Intimidate comes out. Fake Out hits the Groudon, and Will-O-Wisp comes out. And Thundurus avoids the attack. That's actually huge. So Airstream comes through here, a much safer option than going for something like a Wild Charge. The Dragapult goes down, and so Guilio's supportive Dragapult here. A Will-O-Wisp there. I don't know if that would have kept Dragapult alive, but it certainly would have made sure Thundurus did not rampage through Guilio's entire team due to Burn, reducing a Pokemon's damage output considerably, physical damage output considerably. Ferrothorn comes out here, not a horrible option, but a Max Airstream, it's not going to like to take a Max Airstream, it's definitely not going to like to take this Max Knuckle. Matt's in a great position here. Guilio doesn't have any Pokemon that can actually evade Groudon's Precipice Blades, so he just kind of has to hope that it misses. This Groudon also does not have an Intimidate on it. There's no way for Guilio to get another Intimidate on it. Other than maybe Guilio's Incineroar is faster and can get a parting shot off. That's really the only safe bet there. Ferrothorn could go for something like a Protect, could go for Iron Defense, really try to set up, but it's going to be difficult for it to survive much unless Guilio is maxing it, which would definitely be interesting. Max Steel Spikes, definitely try to set it up, but no, the Incineroar is actually Dynamax. This is the first time I think I've ever seen a Dynamaxed Incineroar. I'm not sure entirely what move it's going to be going for. We know it has Fake Out, so Max Strike could be coming out. The Max Knuckle, we saw that's going into the Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn does survive. Will it survive a Precipice Blades, though? There's a chance, since it is a spread move. And of course, but with the attack boost, it's going to be rough. Incineroar does avoid the attack. That's pretty big. We'll see if this Ferrothorn survives, and it does not. Ferrothorn doesn't even get a chance to attack. We'll see what this Incineroar does here. It's going to have to be big. Max Flare is going to be sun boosted, so it'll do a considerable amount of damage. Is it enough to take out a Thundurus, though? Not really. And Incineroar isn't exactly known for having a high damage output. We'll see what... Guilio brings in Kyogre at the very end, but now they're in a tough position because Matt can just switch out Groudon and switch it right back in. Thundurus can just hit the Kyogre with a Wild Charge, even through Protect, or, you know, Max Lightning, that is usually coming from a Wild Charge. And Matt doesn't even switch out. I like this move out of Matt. Just go ahead and hit him with the Precipice Blades. You know that Thundurus is going to be taking out Kyogre, and if it doesn't, that means Kyogre's protecting. Matt is in a phenomenal spot here, and it all comes down to that Will-O-Wisp missing on Guilio's first turn. And, you know, sometimes these Dragapults will, instead of Will-O-Wisp, they'll go for Reflect to give it a little bit more of a, you know, assured damage reduction. Because as we saw there, Will-O-Wisp will just miss sometimes, and that causes all sorts of problems. But of course, it doesn't apply the burn, and the Reflect can wear off. And it's also, I don't believe it is as much of a damage reduction as the Will-O-Wisp. So Precipice Blades comes out. Kyogre does survive the Max Lightning, and Incineroar avoids the Precipice Blades again. Max Strike comes out of it into the Thundurus, but that Max Strike is coming from a Fake Out. Guilio made an interesting choice here, and with the slow, Thundurus attack set goes even higher. This is going to be very, very difficult for Guilio to get out of this. Incineroar Max Flare no longer does as much damage. In fact, the damage is no longer doubled, it is simply halved. Kyogre is in a very rough spot. Groudon can either just protect or switch. It's not going to particularly care too much. And as we saw there, the Thundurus is at +4 attack. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. The good news is that the Thundurus is weak. Kyogre might be faster than it, though I highly doubt it. Unless it's not. We know it's not a Choice Scarf Kyogre, so I don't know. I doubt Guilio would have put a ton of bulk into it, or a ton of speed into it, and goes for the double protect. It fails. Wild Charge comes out. I think that's the correct move. You just go ahead and take out the Kyogre if you can, and you really only have to stare down an Incineroar that, at best, can hit you with a Max Darkness, and the Incineroar does avoid 3 attacks in a row, which is pretty solid. Thundurus does go down, but now it has to contend with an Amoonguss, a Groudon, and at least one other Pokemon out of Matt's side. This could be a Charizard, it could be a Porygon 2, and it is instead an opposing Incineroar. So if Guilio wasn't in a tough spot to begin with, Intimidate comes out onto the physical attacking Incineroar. Incineroar's Dynamax is over, so it can get hit with a Fake Out. And Matt just kind of has to hope that one day, some point, this Precipice Blades will hit. Because I think even one, and there we go, Guilio says, you know what, I've had enough. And if I was Guilio, I would do the same thing. So that was a very interesting game there. Again, that Will-O-Wisp missing was huge. That would have let Dragapult survive, likely fire off more Will-O-Wisps. They have a decent enough chance of hitting, right? It's like 75% accuracy, something along those lines. That would have changed the course of the game dramatically, because as we saw, all of Matt's attackers were physical. Incineroar, Thundurus, Groudon. Incineroar is not really even an attacker at that point. That's more on the Amoonguss side. So Will-O-Wisp hits, Dragapult gets off another Will-O-Wisp, hits him with a Surf, hits him with a Breaking Swipe even, if it has it. I'm assuming this is more of a supporting Dragapult type of deal. I think that dramatically changes the course of the game. I think, you know, at that point, with even just a single burn, it is safe to bring Kyogre in. It'll take a little bit of damage from the Thundurus, as long as you're not going to fire off multiple Intimidates to it, Kyogre is going to be relatively safe, and it's going to be coming into the Groudon, which is always going to be a good move for it. So these players are already ready for game number. Whoop, that was the wrong one. Already ready for game number 2. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And yeah, Matt doesn't change a thing. Goes right into it, brings out the Thundurus and the Amoonguss. I think this is a perfectly smart move. For Guilio, I like this lead so much more. The Ferrothorn plus the Dragapult. Bring in the Incineroar, you know, it's a nice idea against the Groudon, right? But against kind of what the rest of what Matt is bringing against Charizard, which is also a very strong attacking Pokemon, against Thundurus, which will gladly be intimidated. The only Pokemon that really cares about getting hit with Intimidate is the Groudon. Incineroar is going to be switching out left and right. So if I'm Matt here, phenomenal choices. Doesn't switch in the Groudon. There's not really much reason to do that. And for Guilio, having out the Ferrothorn and the Dragapult I think is definitely big, and Dragapult does get Dynamax just right off the bat, so maybe not as supportive as I thought, just a Tech Will-O-Wisp. But I do like this Ferrothorn here because, as we saw in the last game, Matt is slanted very physically. Bringing Kyogre kind of neuters Charizard's special damage output, and so if this Ferrothorn gets a chance to set up multiple iron defenses into body presses, if it has Leech Seed, that could be absolutely terrifying. This Ferrothorn is in a pretty good position, especially if Matt brought the same four as before. Even if Matt brought Porygon in place of Incineroar, Guilio's Ferrothorn is in a phenomenal spot. It's going to be slower than pretty much anything Matt has 90% of the time. Dragapult Max Airstream comes out. Amoonguss's Cold Berry does proc, so the 99% of the time Amoonguss is going to survive this unless maybe it's a crit. And there it goes. Survives it no problem, above half HP. And now Guilio's Pokemon are going to be relatively speedy. Ferrothorn not so much. It's still just so slow. But I imagine, yep, when we get an opposing Max Airstream from Matt, goes into the Dragapult, does about the same percentage of damage as Dragapult did to the Amoonguss. And the speeds are, well, equalized. Ferrothorn, though, I expect to see an Iron Defense here. There you go. Precisely. This Ferrothorn is going to be a problem for Matt. Especially if there is no Charizard. Even if there is a Charizard, it's going to be rough. And Matt, yeah, exactly, already kind of has to resort to going with Max Knuckles into the Ferrothorn to raise Thundurus' attack stat, try to lower Amoongus's, or I'm sorry, raise Thundurus' attack stat, raise his team's attack stat, and lower Ferrothorn's attack stat. Even though that might not help too much because Body Press doesn't really care about the attack stat. Incineroar comes in. Really, its job now is to fake out this Ferrothorn just as much as possible. Dragapult doesn't really care about the Intimidate. So we'll see what Guilio's move here is now. I wouldn't be surprised to see another Max Airstream, probably into the Amoonguss slot. It'll do a chunk to Incineroar, but not enough. Matt's doing a pretty good job of just outlasting and playing around Guilio's Dynamax, and a Max Knuckle comes out here, and this is somewhat of a significant buff. But as we see, Ferrothorn is just already with the Iron Defense. Ferrothorn is just so bulky. It almost doesn't matter. And there we go. We actually see a Leech Seed come out. I like this play a lot from Guilio. Because now Ferrothorn, there's going to be leftovers, and there's going to be the Leech Seed proc. It's going to heal Ferrothorn up quite a bit. Thundurus takes, health is sapped by Leech Seed. And there you go, Ferrothorn is all the way back up to full, and the Thundurus is stuck in, and if Matt wants to, attack with it again, it'll take a little bit more chip damage. You can hit with Max Knuckle, which won't be bad, right? Incineroar's attack stat will get raised. Which is definitely, that's an A+ from Matt's side, and there's not really a good chance for Guilio to switch out. Dragapult, though, goes for the Max Guard. There's not a switch out of the Ferrothorn. If there is a Protect, there you go. A Clutch Protect here actually ensures that a Flare Blitz from Incineroar won't, take out the Ferrothorn. Max Knuckle comes out. It'll do a little bit of just the tiniest amount of damage to Ferrothorn, which will get immediately healed back up. But now both of Matt's Pokemon have a fairly significant attack increase. For both players, though, Dynamax is over. That's definitely something to keep in mind because now they're kind of free to start switching out a lot more freely. We'll start seeing the Kyogre come in. We'll start seeing the Groudon come in. And a lot of this counterplay is now going to be between their Weather Setters coming in and their restricted Pokemon and trying to figure out a good time for this Incineroar to take out Ferrothorn. Now, Guilio does have to be careful. Dragapult is faster than Thundurus, so switching out the Dragapult is 100% going to bring in the Kyogre before the Groudon. And yeah, if Groudon comes in here, the Ferrothorn has already protected. This will almost guarantee to be a Flare Blitz into, a Sun Boosted Flare Blitz into the Ferrothorn slot. Ferrothorn could switch out here. I don't know if if I'm Guilio, I don't know if I switch out. There's a chance this Dragapult has Ally Switch. But I think that is the smart move. Incineroar comes in. That's actually, I think that's pretty reasonable in this case. And the Intimidate comes out, and now it actually intimidates the correct Pokemon. This was a very good call by Guilio. And there we go. The Will-O-Wisp comes out. This was the move that Guilio wanted to have. This is what he wanted turn 1 to be last time, right? This was a good coverage from Guilio. The Will-O-Wisp goes into the Groudon slot. The Intimidate comes out from the Incineroar. That does two things. One, it covers the Groudon switch in, right? Because the Intimidate comes out. But it also covers that the Groudon stays in, or at least switches into the Incineroar slot, potentially, because if the Thundurus gets intimidated, the Defiant triggers, but a Will-O-Wisp into that kind of completely removes that buff. Now, again, if I'm Matt, you pretty much keep in this Incineroar at whatever cost, because you need to keep these attack boosts. Drizzle comes out, as we saw though, Matt is, switching out this Groudon, I think is his #1 priority. He doesn't want to get any damage on it. He needs it for the weather. But actually the Incineroar does come out. Amoonguss comes in. And we'll see what comes out of Guilio's Incineroar. A fake out into Groudon or Incineroar into the Incineroar slot. And Precipice Blades comes out. This will still do a chunk of damage. Yeah, even into the Incineroar. So now we're actually in a pretty interesting spot where an Origin Pulse out of this Kyogre is going to be doing a hefty chunk of damage to whatever Matt decides to bring in or leave in. Of course, Protect is always an option, but Protecting doesn't really do much against this Kyogre. Of course, unless we do see the Spore here. Spore into Kyogre would do a considerable amount of damage. The Amoonguss, though, is not looking too great. Regenerator did restore some of its HP, but Kyogre almost always has something like an Ice Beam, and that's going to be doing just that at the very least. That will do 50% of Amoonguss's health. I wouldn't be surprised if it did more and took it out. We'll see here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Incineroar switch out, but the Kyogre actually goes for the Water Spout right off the bat, and Groudon goes down. Amoonguss goes below half health. Matt, though, does now get a safe switch in for either the Incineroar or the Thundurus. Taunt comes out. Very good move out of Guilio. Now this Amoonguss is dead in the water. Spore does not come out, and Matt is going to have to switch out this Amoonguss ASAP. Smart move here, bringing the Thundurus into the open slot for the safe move, and can switch in the Incineroar for the Amoonguss if he potentially wants to. Kyogre is under a little bit of pressure from this Thundurus, but there's no attack boost on it. I imagine this Thundurus is not exactly the bulkiest Pokemon, but it can probably take a Wild Charge. Incineroar, on the other hand, doesn't really want to take a superpower, especially since it wants to be switching in a lot. But the good news for Guilio is that now the rain is just permanently set up. Ferrothorn is really, I would say, a pretty safe switch in at this point, because you can Iron Defense or you can just Protect. The Dragapult comes in, and the Amoonguss comes out as expected, and the Incineroar comes in. So Intimidate will come out. It literally doesn't matter against Guilio's Pokemon, though. Dragapult has Clear Body, so it is not affected by the stat drops, and Kyogre is a purely special attacker, so Intimidate really doesn't do anything against it. And Guilio goes for the safe turn here, switching into the Dragapult, protecting the Kyogre. Superpower comes out into the Kyogre slot. Actually a pretty smart move out of Guilio, because even if the Superpower went into the Dragapult slot, Dragapult would not have been affected thanks to its Ghost typing. And now Guilio can make any other switches that he would like to make. Matt bring in the Amoonguss again. The Amoonguss is pretty important, right? It's going to kind of do the most against the remainder of Guilio's team. But of course, Ferrothorn comes in, and now it's in a really, really nice spot. The Iron Barbs are going to come out. That does more damage to the Incineroar than the Incineroar did to the Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn can hit with the Iron Defense. It will not really care about taking a Flare Blitz in this weather, and with a Will-O-Wisp coming out into the Amoonguss, that's going to be reliable, consistent chip damage onto this Amoonguss. So even if it does stay in, there is absolutely no way that it is going to be surviving for very long. Again, Regenerator is making this Amoonguss look way bulkier than it really has any right to be. That's one of the main draws of this Pokemon. Every time it goes back into the party, it can heal for up to 50% of its HP with that Regenerator. So last time we saw it, it was down to 100 hit points, and it got all the way back up to, I believe it was around, let's see, that would have been about 180 hit points, so it heals for a considerable amount. It heals for 1/3 with Regenerator, I believe. Amoonguss's Protect does come out. Phantom Force, though, that's not going to care too much. This will go into either, could go into either slot. I anticipate it going into the Amoonguss, just because that's really the most threatening Pokemon. As we said, Incineroar kind of neutered with the rain that's out and about here. Parting shot though, Thundurus comes in. If I'm Guilio, I think you just, like, Ferrothorn is one of those Pokemon that if you have a strong fire type, you can delete it instantly. But if you don't, you're in a bit of a pickle because it will just set up on you. There we see the Leech Seed coming out. I think Guilio was expecting this. It does get a little bit of chip on Thundurus, and now Guilio just slowly starts chipping away at Matt's team. And as long as he keeps going with strong switches, alternating with moves like Protect, Phantom Force, these Leech Seeds are going to be big. Amoonguss comes back, Incineroar comes out. Guilio does not bring Kyogre back in to reset the rain yet, but I imagine that that is going to be happening at some point, probably before this Ferrothorn sets up, or after this Dragapult comes back after the Phantom Force. A little bit more damage onto the Incineroar, not too much as it's not very effective. Thundurus goes for the crunch into the Dragapult. It's going to do a lot of damage, and in fact it takes it out. One of the benefits of this, more offensive Thundurus that we've seen in the last couple of years. Iron Defense though does come out. Guilio now actually has a safe switch in for this Kyogre. Or heck, even the Incineroar. Is not necessarily a horrible option, but the Thundurus is on the battlefield. You probably don't want to be triggering the Defiant right now. Your Ferrothorn is still in the process of setting up. Putting in the Kyogre, hitting it with a Protect, not a bad move. Incineroar though, Fake Out, there is Fake Out potential that would likely go into the Ferrothorn, but it would still take a lot of chip damage, which it doesn't necessarily want to do. Parting Shot, of course, will go into the Ferrothorn. It'll lower its attack stat, but every time the Iron Defense buffs up, that's going to be a little bit more terrifying. Even with these Intimidates and Parting Shots, Ferrothorn just doesn't really care that much. Iron Defense is the way to go. Kyogre uses the Protect just in case. As we see, Matt didn't attack into it, but I always think that's the smart move from Guilio, covering his options. Kyogre doesn't need to be attacking right now, and if it goes down and the rain eventually goes down, Ferrothorn will fall to a combination of Superpower plus Flare Blitz, almost assuredly, until it gets a couple more Iron Defenses under its belt. Body Press actually comes out already, no more setting up for the moment, doesn't want to take too much time, goes into the Amoonguss slot, but this Amoonguss can just keep switching back into the party, and coming back out. Matt's in a not horrible position. Kyogre has used its Protect. This Amoonguss can just go back inside. The Incineroar can come out. And, it's gonna be in a pretty tough spot. The Incineroar on Guilio's side comes in. The Intimidate comes out. But, now this buffs up the Thundurus a little bit with the Defiant. So Incineroar is going to be taking a hefty chunk of damage that it really doesn't want to be taking. Wild Charge comes out, better than potential Superpower, and it will cause recoil. Incineroar does actually survive too. That's pretty big. Another Body Press comes out from Guilio into the Thundurus, and that's going to get it pretty low. A Fake Out from Guilio's Incineroar might work, but instead, the Spore comes out. So Incineroar is fast asleep. Amoonguss hurt by its burn. I imagine we'll see a switch at some point soon. Now this Thundurus is a wee bit scary. Not too much, but a little bit. Now, if you're Guilio, you're in a interesting position. Ferrothorn, full health, but definitely still wants to set up. I would not want to bring in the Kyogre right now into the Incineroar slot, simply because a potential Wild Charge would delete Kyogre at the moment. It's not safe to bring it into the Incineroar slot. If you let the Incineroar go down, however, then you're in kind of a decent spot. Ferrothorn, though, does not want to take a Superpower. So Matt has some options. It depends on which slot he thinks is going to switch out. Exactly. I was fairly confident the Incineroar was going to stay in. There's just kind of no reason for it to switch out. Ferrothorn takes that like an absolute champ, and now this Thundurus is going to go down to the Iron Barbs. No more Thundurus, which means this Kyogre is completely safe now to come in. Ferrothorn is still going to be doing, still going to be doing work, and the Body Press will do even more damage into the Amoonguss. Sludge Bomb comes out. It's going to do a little bit. Does do enough to kill Incineroar, and now there's a safe Kyogre switch in. Matt has a Fire type and a Grass type that doesn't have any offensive moves. And Amoonguss can't go back inside to get any more health. If it comes down to Ferrothorn and Amoonguss, which it very well could, Ferrothorn wins that literally every single time. Incineroar comes in. There is certainly fake out pressure, but that's not going to be enough with both Ferrothorn and Kyogre. Now the good news for Matt is that Kyogre had to come in before the rain faded away. So there's one, maybe two more turns on the rain. Flare Blitz into the Ferrothorn is going to do a chunk of damage, but probably not enough. And Spore into the Kyogre is kind of Guilio's safest bet in terms of keeping his Pokemon alive. But this Water Spout coming out is just going to do so much damage, and it takes out both Pokemon no problem. And that's kind of the threat of a healthy Kyogre. So there we go. That was game number 2. Goes to Guilio. So we were tied at 1-1. That game, we got to see more of what I was talking about. Positioning, making sure different Pokemon come in at the right times. The Amoonguss regaining probably close to 200, 300 health when it kept getting switched in with that Incineroar and the Thundurus. That was huge. It soaked up so much damage. But Guilio was able to recognize his win condition, which was keeping the Ferrothorn alive. The Ferrothorn stays alive. It's going to continually hit with Iron Barb damage. Body Press is going to be doing not a ton of damage, but enough, and it's going to be an unbreakable wall. The good news was he also kept his Kyogre alive, and as long as the Thundurus goes down, Kyogre kind of just sweeps the team. Thundurus went down to Ferrothorn, Groudon, and all the rest of them went down to Water Spouts from Kyogre. Proper threat assessment from Guilio, making sure that he played to his outs. Matt is going to have to come into this with probably a little bit of a different strategy, right? Switching out a lot was nice. The Amoonguss stayed fairly healthy, but he might have to come in with a little bit of a different approach, a different move. We saw the Ferrothorn do a ton of work. Finally, unlike in that first game, Charizard could be brought in. Very strong threat, doesn't care about Intimidates from Incineroar. It does care a little bit about the rain. But as we saw, Matt's Incineroar didn't really do a ton. It didn't intimidate the Dragapult effectively at all. The Intimidates were useless against Kyogre. The only real thing that it was there for was hitting the Ferrothorn for a potential super effective Flare Blitz. And if I'm going to do that, I would almost always want, if I'm going to be looking to have the super effective move, I kind of want my attacker that is going to be A, speed boosting, B, putting down a G-Max Wildfire to continually chip away at my opponent's team, which would have been huge in that game too. I think I would like to see the Charizard get brought in from Matt's side. I don't think we'll see any Porygons. I don't know if we'll see any Regielekis, but players are ready, and they're going into game number 3, and we see the same leads as game 2 out of both players. Thundurus and Amoonguss from Matt, Ferrothorn and Dragapult from Guilio. Now, if I'm Matt, I hope that Matt has that Charizard in the back alongside the Groudon instead of the Incineroar. Burning Shot last time was doing diddly squat. But both players are, again, this is a bit of a hard one to call. Both players are playing very well, but they have important moves to make. But there, of course, we see the Charizard, right? Matt made the correct assessment, figured out, hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to approach this one. Because guess what? Charizard also doesn't really care about burn that much. Of course, it can get burned, and it will take the chip damage, but its attack stat doesn't really care about it. So Guilio, does go ahead and actually Dynamax. This is the same move as before. I think this is still correct. I absolutely think this is still correct. I think you have to get rid of the Amoonguss's Koba Berry. You have to go ahead and get damage on it. I think that's just the number one thing to do. Unfortunately, a Ferrothorn's Iron Defense here is not going to be nearly as strong as it was in the first game because it's not Incineroar that's in, it's a Charizard. Rage Powder comes out, so even if there was a move into the Charizard, It's not going to do anything, but the max airstream, that was always going into the Amoonguss every day of the week. Codeberry procs, we'll see the same amount that, as before, unless there's a crit. Yep, about 35-40% into the Amoonguss. Ferrothorn could certainly go for a leech seed. It could go for a body press right off the bat. We pretty much know its entire move slot, move pool though. Leech seed, body press, iron defense, and protect. It's not very great into a Charizard. The iron defense comes out and that doesn't really do anything. So now Guilio is in a bit of a rough position where he used the iron defense, but it doesn't do anything against the Charizard. The only thing that's going to do anything against the Charizard is switching the Kyogre. But if that happens, you either have to switch out the Dragapult or the Ferrothorn, which you just tried to set up. Groudon comes in. It's a bit of a tricky position. I think for Matt, Dynamaxing the Charizard, going for a G-Max Wildfire right off the bat is not necessarily a poor move. But I think going for a max Airstream to even out the speed tiers a little bit, or, you know, potentially get Charizard even faster than a Kyogre that's coming in, is going to be the right move here. Making sure that this Charizard stays alive throughout this match. Yep, this is definitely what I like to see. Matt holding his switch for the Groudon for the next turn, expecting the Kyogre to come in, as that's the only way to mitigate Charizard's damage output. But Matt making sure that he uses Amoonguss to keep this Charizard alive, no matter the cost. So the Kyogre will get a +1 speed with what is I am expecting to be a max Airstream out of Guilio's Dragapult. But Charizard will also get a little bit of a speed boost, and then a Groudon coming in Groudon comes in for this Amoonguss slot, changes the weather, and then Matt is ready to roll. Rage Powder comes out. Kyogre is not attacking, so no need. This Charizard is not in really any danger at all. Max Phantasm actually comes out. This is one way for Guilio to lower special attacks, or actually it lowers defense, and the Amoonguss actually survives at 1. This is dangerous territory for Guilio. I think he was fairly confident that. I wonder what he was thinking there, because, you know, maybe he was expecting Amoonguss to just either risk itself or for there to be a potential switch out, something is the same as last game. Amoonguss is in, but now Amoonguss is in a pretty good spot, and now the thing is, Dragapult is going to be faster than Kyogre, right? That's one thing Matt has to consider. Which means whatever move this Dragapult uses into the Amoonguss is going to kill the Amoonguss. It's at 1 HP. Gives Kyogre free reign to attack into the Charizard, which Guilio actually says no to, but Guilio made a change, did not bring in Center of his own, brought the Regieleki. So now, this is a bit of a problem for Matt. Regieleki will delete a Charizard if it's not careful. Guilio's team is so much faster than Matt's. It's actually insanely faster. There's finally a critical hit on 1 HP, just really making sure that this Amoonguss is dead. I'm going to be honest, I am a little bit surprised that the Amoonguss was not switched out in favor of the Groudon. Matt was potentially just... There's a chance Matt definitely just wanted a safe switch-in for the Groudon, though, which I don't blame. Keeping the Groudon healthy is going to be huge, especially against the Kyogre that's already below 50%. But this Charizard, it's taken Life Orb hits, which it really doesn't want to do. It's fine taking Life Orb hits, but it just puts it closer and closer to, the automatic kill range from something like an Electro Web out of Regieleki. Good news for Matt. Thundurus and Groudon will gladly take an Electro Web because Groudon doesn't care. Thundurus will only get stronger, and at this point, Thundurus is already slower than everything but the Ferrothorn. And the Kyogre on Guilio's team. But yeah, no, Guilio's speed tiers are higher, but any other stat lowers, and Matt's going to be in for some pretty good business. The other thing to consider is that, the Charizard doesn't really... The defense lower on the Charizard doesn't really do too much. It might matter in the long game if the Charizard stays in, and Ferrothorn ends up being important. But it's not really going to do too much. Will-O-Wisp comes out into the Thundurus, hits this time. This could be big, but Regieleki is not exactly... Thunder comes out, into the Charizard slot. Regieleki is not exactly bulky. This Crunch could very well kill. Oh, and it was not enough. That's huge. Regieleki is still alive through the Crunch. Thundurus isn't in a horrible spot now. There's not much that Dragapult can do to really kill it. Thunder is not super effective into Thundurus, which is absolutely phenomenal. It just needs a little bit of damage. Yeah, it just needs to do a little bit of damage, just the tiniest amount, into that Regieleki slot. Groudon comes in. I do like this play. Get the Charizard out of there, bring in something that is going to be very, very safe. It's not going to take much damage from Dragapult. It's not going to take any damage from the Regieleki. No Regieleki uses anything except lightning moves, but this was the danger. Dragapult can Will-O-Wisp with the rest of the team. Volt Switch comes in, doesn't affect Groudon. This is pretty big. Wild Charge tickles Regieleki for just enough, won't do too much recoil damage either, and now the only real threat to Charizard is out of the way. So Thundurus is going to take chip damage. Groudon is going to take chip damage. Unfortunately, Matt did not get a G-Max Wildfire off. That is probably going to be important in the long run. It might not be that important though. G-Max Wildfire would certainly do work. Even if Kyogre comes in, it does it does an eighth of Pokemon's HP every single turn that it's in. So every single Pokemon will be taking 1/8 damage, totaling to, and I believe that's over 4 turns, totaling to, a health bar total, a complete health bar for any, totals to a complete health bar between the two Pokemon slots that take damage. So a lot of damage from G-Max Wildfire, not including the main damage output. So that's a lot that's missed. But Ferrothorn wasn't out for Charizard to take advantage of. It is what it is. Guilio now. Again, now we're back into a positioning battle. Kyogre can come in, erase the sun. Charizard damage output goes to the ground. As soon as Charizard switches in, it has to take a turn to attack. So Kyogre can come in. Crunch doesn't do a lot of damage to the Dragapult thanks to that burn. Leech Seed comes out, and now Matt's in a tricky position where he does not have a super high damage output, and the Solar Power chips away at him. Leech Seed comes out. Yeah, Matt is just slowly going to get chipped away with no chip damage to trade of his own. Kyogre can come into that Ferrothorn slot, reset the sun, and it's a bit of a tricky pickle. Of course, if Guilio doesn't switch out, then Charizard, and Charizard does go for a fire type move into the Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn will almost always go down, but Charizard is actually going to switch out. Groudon comes in. We'll see what Guilio does. Ferrothorn just goes for the protect. Guilio's not even switching, not even worrying about it. Just letting Matt play mind games with himself. Dragon Darts comes out. This will probably take out the Thundurus, and it's gonna do. It does a little bit to the Groudon, but it does enough to Thundurus to take it out. Now, if Guilio wants to switch in the Kyogre, the rain will be up permanently, and Charizard's damage output will go, to the ground, just like the rest of the team. Here's the Charizard. Dragapult is still, healthy enough. Ferrothorn, healthy, perfectly healthy. A Heat Wave coming out, it'll do a fair amount of damage. But if the Kyogre comes in, Kyogre A resists it, and B, Drizzle will have the damage output of the fire type move. But actually, no, there's no switch, actually. Ferrothorn going for the protect? No, because we would have seen that. Heat Wave comes out, Dragapult avoids the attack. Ferrothorn does just go down. To be fair, Guilio is still probably in a pretty good position. Now Precipice Blades doesn't, there's no target for the Precipice Blades. And Charizard just continues to take chip damage. Groudon continues to take chip damage. Who's up? Chip damage. Phantom Force could go into either one of these. But Kyogre comes out now. It can go for a, it probably has Origin Pulse. Water Spout, though, might even be enough. We'll see what comes into this. Precipice Blades comes out. Charizard is not going to be too happy. There's no speed boosts on that side. if Dragapult's going to the Charizard is 100%, you know, KO'd. Yeah, not even close. Groudon, or Kyogre is always faster than Groudon. We'll see if Groudon survives. If it does survive, it's going to need a crit into both of these Pokemon in order to win. Yeah, no. And the Groudon goes down. So, looks like Guilio does, in fact, take this one in a 2-3 game. So, good job to the Kyogre player. Guilio takes that one down, comes back from behind after losing pretty harshly in game 1. Wins game 2 pretty decisively. Game 3, it got a little bit closer. Both players made some pretty strong adaptations with their team, but the Guilio bringing in the Regieleki put a lot of pressure on the Charizard. Matt pretty much had to bring in Charizard because Ferrothorn was simply there, right? It was there, and it wasn't a huge major problem, but it shifted the course of the game. It shifted the momentum of that game 2. Enough that Matt was not comfortable with Incineroar. The Incineroar didn't do a lot in game 2. It didn't even do a lot in game 1. So Charizard comes in. Naturally, Guilio, if you're thinking as a VGC player, you have to think in your opponent's shoes. What's Matt going to bring? Charizard. So Guilio brings the Regieleki, right? And if you're Matt, I think Matt made the correct correction, made the proper correction is the better way to say it. But Guilio just played around it really, really well. I think the Will-O-Wisps hitting in this game 3, both Will-O-Wisps hitting was very, very big. Thundurus not taking out the Regieleki in one hit was important, right? If that crunch had gone through, Charizard is much safer. It can stay in for another turn, and the game changes drastically from there. Of course, I would have liked to see Matt fire off a G-Max Wildfire in place of a Max Airstream at least once. Just because there would have been a fair amount of chip damage. The Regieleki would have gone down on its own after that crunch, potentially, right? Dragapult would have taken some chip damage. The Kyogre would have been, would have potentially been lower there. But this was just a really well-played game out of both players, especially Guilio, adapting as the series goes on. And that's one of the main things that I do really love about VGC. I think a lot of players do love, is that you have the same 6 Pokemon, but the adaptations you make, you can draw out picks from your opponent, right? You can draw out a team comp that your opponent brings that's favorable for something else that you want, right? And that's a little bit what Guilio did, bring the Ferrothorn, bring in the pressure so that Matt brings in the Charizard, so that Guilio can then bring in the Regieleki as an additional counter to whatever Matt brings. So very well played out of both players. We'll continue on with this analysis in the next video as we await Players Cup 4. But for now, be safe, be smart, make wise decisions, and farewell.